Ghost with Cats, Chapter 5, Anxiety. Annie asked the admant to sit next to her in the cockpit and quickly started up the engines. There was no time for a pre-flight check. They had less than 3 minutes before the fireworks would start. The S-300 started and handled beautifully. From the smell, she realized it was the one which brought her back from Colorado. The stench of Red Label unfiltered cigarettes was unmistakable. She shivered, trying not to think about Jabe groping her and what he planned to do to her. Her palms were slick as she turned the throttle. She could not panic. Not yet, she told herself. Escape first, have the panic attack later. The Sikorskys' GPS said they were in southern Utah. She flew as fast as she could push the large bird. They only had enough fuel to make it to St. George. Rule for survival number 2. Always have a plan, another plan, and an exit strategy. Her brain began to formulate all the ways they could escape from St. George. They could backtrack to Nevada and catch the Amtrak to Colorado. She kept enough cash in her sock to get what they needed and get a coach car on a train or buy bus tickets to Colorado. Or perhaps a cheap used car. There was always a Walmart or thrift store to get clothing from. But there were also flaws in each idea. A car would mean gas stations. Holidays meant possible DUI checkpoints on the road and weather delays. Her mind ran the scenarios. Buses and trains required IDs, which were not easy to get. They could get to her granddaddy's cabin easily in a few days, regardless of her choice. The only problem was moving undetected in today's surveillance society. She wished she could just buy the fuel and fly the S-300 home. But all aviation fuel purchases were tracked now, and she would have to report her flight plan to the FAA, which ruled out traveling by air and keeping the lovely helicopter for herself. In the back, she could hear Matt asking Bourne and Brees all kinds of questions about their world. He was a typical, straight-out-of-college sci-fi geek. She hovered and rotated when they were about 10 miles clear. A jet of white gases shot skyward, followed by a billowing pillar of fire. It was spectacular. It was beautiful. Annie was glad not to be there. She looked over at Tal. She could not read his expression as he watched the energy venting into the atmosphere. Matt was expressing his amazement colorfully. The Sikorsky helicopter vibrated in the turbulence. Then she turned it and headed for town. She knew she could land by the river unseen, or so she hoped. She changed channels and handed a headset to Tal so she could talk to the admint. Welcome to our messed up little world. What exactly should I call you? Your whole Prime Admint title is a mouthful. You may call me Tal, he answered. Tal, not Vanth. Vanth is like a clan or family name from my father. Tal is my name, he explained. Oh, I see. I thought Vanth was a common name like John. Our personal names are first, and our family names are after. Vanth is quite uncommon. There are only 5 of us left. One is ranked as 2nd tier. One is in the 5th tier. One is considered 8th tier. And our youngest brother is not old enough to be ranked, but we believe he will be third tier like I am. Why? Who did you meet from my people? Tal was curious. A regent of the second tier came to this world and met her. That such a secret was kept from the fleet high command surprised him. Annie was silent for a moment, swallowing several times. The other of your people, the one I met, his name was Vanth, Regent Vanth True. Is he kin to you? She was flying and did not realize he was staring at her in shock. It was a piece of information he never expected. Somehow, his voice was steady. How did you come to meet Regent Vanth True? Annie continued speaking as she flew the aircraft and fidgeted with various knobs and dials. He was a friend of my grandfather Opier's. He was very polite. Grandfather and Rabbi Isaac told me some information about your people, like you required high protein and nutrient-rich diets. That's how I knew you needed protein bars and electrolytes. She kept talking, but he stopped listening. Annie met his eldest brother, who was elevated to second-tier regent under the old king Salomo. There were only 4 in the entire kingdom at the time. He died under curious circumstances the same year Annie met him. It could not be a coincidence. She sat next to him now and rescued them. True somehow made it so he would meet her. They were supposed to meet her together. But why? Tal's mind ran through everything he knew from the beginning to try to figure out why True would come here and why he would save a human's life. True anguished over the decline of their people, the steady population loss, the ruination of values, and the decrease in hope as an illness. Bitterness crept into the soul of their people since the loss of heart began. True was determined to find a way to restore the Eloh. The house of Vanth was chosen by the old king to save the kingdom, but then both True and the king died. Tal was only 23 at the time. He had just survived the lottery for the second time. It was True who told him and his brothers the energy signature would lead them to find the lost light of their people. They were supposed to look for the light together, but True died before he could tell Tal and their brothers what the light was. Sitting next to Annie, Tal felt more confused. He did not know his brother or any of his people had come to this world. He did not know what the lost light was. He did not have a solution to this problem. Something soft and warm squeezed his hand, and he looked down. Annie's hand was holding his. Are you okay? She asked. Then it returned to flying the helicopter. Just thinking about True, he answered softly. His voice held a sad longing. It sounded like grief, a tone Annie knew too well. You were related. It was more of a statement than a question. She knew at least part of the answer. True was Tal's relative. They were close, and from his reaction, True was also dead. He was my eldest brother, most trusted and closest friend. He died the year you met him, Tal admitted. He had never gotten over the emotions which came with that afternoon. He did not deal well with feelings. It was not in his nature. Oh, I'm so sorry, Tal. She sounded sincere. Many died at that time. he responded coolly, remembering too much pain, so he pushed it away. Annie changed the subject. She could see his discomfort, even in the dim light of the cockpit. You never said how you came here. Was it just to look for Pandora? No. I came to your world because before True died, he told us to watch for the Song of Destruction, your Pandora energy. He wanted we were to go together to look for something he called the light. Tall answered, his tone frustrated. The light of what? Annie asked. I do not know. My brother died before he could tell me. He sounded despondent, even to himself. It seemed it was a fool's errand, and he was the fool. Annie landed the Sikorsky just outside a city near a river. The large helicopter was beeping because their fuel was gone. Can we acquire more fuel? Tall asked. Annie was unhappy as she said, it would make us too easy to find. What is that? Tall watched as she pulled something from inside her sock. She nodded at it. My burner cell. As she sent a message. Fuzzy Wuzzy has twin sisters. She explained to Tall and Vorn. I'm letting my guardian know where I am headed. Vorn asked, why is your guardian not with you? It's easier for him to watch out for me from afar, she shrugged. They moved cautiously toward a large lighted area, a highway. Tripping repeatedly, Annie was having issues with the boots and coat she acquired from where they were imprisoned because they were many sizes too big. On the outskirts of the city was a building Matt and Annie were interested in, a store where it was not unusual for people in pajamas to shop in the middle of the night. Annie and Matt slipped into the giant store to purchase clothing, coats, and food. As they walked through the store, Matt seemed impressed with her resourcefulness. I should call you Mrs. Bourne instead of Dr. Dove, Matt said jokingly. How did you learn all this? I mean, Dr. Fitzgerald made you sound like a crazy recluse who quit researching Omni-Energy because it hurt your feelings not to be able to reveal your mother's discovery. Annie started shaking as she looked through blue jeans for any that would fit Brace. Finally, she just tossed the largest sweatshirts and sweatpants she could find in the cart. Is it crazy to stop working on your parents' research after they are murdered in front of you for it? Matt looked at her horrified. Your parents were murdered? I thought they were killed in an accident. Annie laughed harshly, but a tear ran down her cheek. A woman hanging clothes from a cart looked at them oddly. Yeah, they accidentally were stabbed and got their throats cut by a group of terrorists who were looking to use Pandora to blow up the Saudi and Yemeni oil fields. Her voice became raspy. She was having trouble breathing. The panic attack she resisted for so long was here, but she tried to breathe and talk through it, like her therapist told her to do. And I was accidentally kidnapped and held hostage because they couldn't figure it out. They tortured me, but I wouldn't help them, not after India. That's why I won't work on it. It's too dangerous. They almost blew up the planet. But no, people still want to use it. For as if all those thousands and thousands of people in India and Japan dying wasn't enough. Her breaths were short and shallow as she fought and failed to hold it together. Everything was starting to go black. Annie? Annie! Matt's voice was trying to talk to her, but she couldn't hear him. She didn't feel him lift her and carry her into a changing room. All she heard was voices shouting at her to tell them the calculations. She could still feel the freezing cold of ice water being dumped on her battered body. Shh. Deep breaths, Annie. Slow, deep breaths. You're okay. We're just in a store doing some shopping. No one can hurt you. Matt's voice was low and calm. She heard him talking to someone. It's okay. She has panic attacks. That's why we shop in the middle of the night. No people. Just give us a few more minutes. No, no, she doesn't need an ambulance. He was rubbing circles on her back. Annie took a staggering breath, trying desperately to control her shaking. I, I'm, I'm sorry, Matt. It's okay, sis. Too much stuff. We'll finish and head home, okay? Matt's voice was soft and reassuring. An old sales clerk was standing next to him, looking concerned, and Annie realized they were in a changing room. Are you okay, honey? Yes, I'm so sorry. I'm just not good with new places. Annie lied. But it wasn't a lie. It was her reality since that week. The knuckles on the back of her left hand pressed into her lips hard enough they hurt. That's fine. Just stay here as long as your sister needs. The lady patted her hand before walking away. You better now? Matt whispered. No, I will never be better, but I can finish what I need to do. I'm sorry. It's been a while since I had one that bad, Annie admitted. Hey, my mom had them all the time. I shouldn't have pressed you. I'm sorry. Matt's eyes held such sadness and sympathy at the same time, but Annie needed to ask. Had? Matt leaned against the wall, rubbing his face. She died while I was in college. She self-medicated with alcohol and Xanax. Sometimes she cut herself. They declared it a suicide, but I knew it was an accident. They sat for several minutes in silence before Matt spoke. I didn't know the truth about your parents. I'm really sorry. Annie nodded. So am I. She stood, smiling wanly. Let's finish shopping before our guests get antsy and come looking for us. Aliens in Walmart? Meh, it's Utah. Who would notice? His cavalier tone made her smile. As they shopped, she told him about her life before that week as a linguist and analyst. He appeared to think she was living out some amazing adventure, laughing as she told him, I love the math and studying languages, but it wasn't worth the paperwork. I would rather live my quiet life as a ghostwriter. Matt and Annie paid and slipped back to the Eloh. Annie told them everything she knew about the Pandora failures as they walked to a truck stop. Matt got a room at the motor inn, giving them shelter while they waited for morning. Annie locked herself in the bathroom, but they could hear her crying through the thin walls. Matt went in to check on her and emerged a few minutes later with a very worried look. She's having an anxiety attack, Matt announced calmly. Tall looked at him confused. How can feeling concerned physically hurt her? Vorn held up his hand before Matt could answer. Master, humans do not have the ability to completely control their emotions as we do. Lady Annie has exhibited great courage in the last few hours. Perhaps it is not in her nature to do so. Matt, Has Lady Annie told you the source of her anxiety attack? Matt nodded his head but refused to explain, only responding, "It's not for me to say. She just needs some time." An hour later, Annie came out, changed from her pajamas into jeans and a sweatshirt. "We need to get started." She seemed calm and collected, as she had when they escaped.